This is the first part of our carbon fiber seat cowl project, and I detailed out on this video what had come before it that led up to this and how this is going to evolve over the next 2 or 3 videos. I'm not sure how many right now. We're going to lay up the part today on this video. Now, it's a great video for anybody new to carbon fiber or somebody that has never seen a part laid up in a positive manner. Now, a positive manner means you have a buck and you lay the carbon fiber over the top of it and use that to make your form, and then you put the finish on it. You sand and carve in the final finish. As opposed to a reverse, a female mold where the finish is already on the part, but then you have to make the part. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. We're going to show the method I use and how to put the finish on a future video. You can watch it in 4K. Now, on this series of videos, I'm going to show how to make a very simple, easy to make carbon fiber part, a seat cowl for another one of my motorcycles. I've made them before. I have some video, but it's very old. I want to make a brand new video starting with the beginning and going all the way through the actual time when you put it on a bike and go for a ride. Now, I made the rear seat cowls for the R1. I have 2 of them. One is a traditional one, and I made one from composite wood, and I was real happy the way they worked out. Then there was a time last winter when I had COVID for about 2 weeks, and I did the basic. I laid this up just to see if I liked the way it looked, and I wanted to ride the bike a few times before I actually did the final buffing and put trim on it and everything. And I was real happy the way this worked out, and now I want to make a similar part for the MT-09. I always like to just show this part. This is a part I made. I wanted the equivalent of a backrest here, and I always wanted to have a lower one, a higher one, and I switch them back and forth as I'm in the mood, to be honest. I also made the cafe seat from scratch for the RD, and I've had that on for years, but I switch it back and forth whenever I'm in the mood to have evil twins. So just to set the stage, the MT-09, I've made a lot of parts, modified a lot of parts, added carbon fiber parts, made carbon fiber parts from scratch. I have 2 years of work, got rid of the screws in the screen, painted a lot of the flat black parts and blue, and made some of these little covers and parts that I think dressed up the bike to my taste anyway. Now, the one I haven't made yet, I wanted to make this cowl similar to the 650, and I don't know, as I'm designing it, I don't know about the curve. I know I want it to go back about as far as the strap, and I want it to slide on and just attach with, so it's easy on and easy off. So I'm going to try to do the same thing I did for the 650 and cover every step. May get a little lengthy, but I'll try not to leave out any steps. So step 1 is I have to take the seat off and take the strap off. 2 screws and the strap will come right off, and we don't need the strap, and I want to make a little change in that little area where the strap goes. Of course, you have to save the hardware. We're going to ultimately use that hardware, and that same bolt is going to be the one that holds the cowl in place. So I want to save the hardware, the original nut, and the washers. And of course, I want to save this strap too, because one of the beautiful parts of this, if I don't want to use the cowl, I want to take it off and have the rear seat, I want to be able to put the strap right back on. That's one of the beauties of this. It'll go right on and right off, 2 bolts. And anytime I have to take the seat off for any reason, I always clean up that area. There's always a little dust and dirt. Anything in there, I like to keep the bike clean. Now, anytime I work with any part, step 1 is take some simple green and clean it. I don't want to have any fingerprints on it, any grease. Once the part is clean, now this is the little notch where that strap goes, and I want to eliminate that, and there's a bump, a little divot there where that strap is imprinted into the seat. So what I'm going to try to do is using Gorilla Tape, and this is a tricky thing. You wouldn't think this would work as well as it does, but I did it on the prototype part, the 650, and it worked fine. So rather than get too involved in it, you can use a piece of tape to save you a couple hours of work. What that's going to do is just let the carbon fiber, while it's curing, just drape over that little divot, and it doesn't have to be perfect, because we're going to do, again, when you make a part from the inside out. At the very end, you sand the final finish in and put a nice finish on it. So it's not real important if that divot is just not perfect right now, or if we have to put a little thimble of Bondo on there. And I can see it doesn't lay down exactly flat because it's a complex curve, but in the end, it's not going to matter at all. When the part is done, you're not even going to know that was there. Now, I go around the whole thing so there's a skirt. I want to have a skirt so that the part that I'm making is a little bit longer than the seat. I don't see the seat, this bottom of the seat peeking out from under the part. I want to extend it about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. I also, and I did this on the original prototype, I just laid out some fine line tape so that what that'll do, it'll imprint hopefully right into the part. When I pull the part off, I'll see that line. It'll make it easier to do the cutting, and it's not a thing right now it's going to matter because we're going to put the cloth right over that, but it should imprint that little, just a little, I don't know what to even call it, a little imprint line. Now I decided, and I went back and forth with the Gorilla Tape, back and forth, thinking, well, I'll put a couple extra little pieces here just to kind of firm that up. Again, none of this is critical. Even if I didn't do any of that, I could just take care of it with Bondo. So now the trick is with the blue tape. Now the blue tape acts like a little protection just in case some of the resin happens to work its way down through the Saran wrap that we're going to cover the seat with. We're going to make a mummy out of the seat. And you can get those wrinkles out. That'll make the part a little nicer. But in the end, you're going to have to sand the outside anyways. But it is a good idea, because painter's tape is low tack. So this is the step that gets a little tricky. This is ordinary Saran wrap. And I try to wrap it, I tried to do one of those shrink bags that you do for, you get at the dollar store. It didn't work. And this was just a little bit clumsier doing this part because it looks like it's terrible with all the wrinkles in it and everything, but it's really there just to protect the seat because I don't want to get any resin or anything on the seat. And as ugly as it is and as crude as it is, when I go to take that part off, it'll pop right off. It'll be no problem at all. It's also helped bridging the gap over that little divot that we're trying to eliminate here at the end. So now I need to make a pattern because the carbon fiber that Dave Midgley sent me, Dave Midgley and Dick Hewitt, thank you guys. I don't want to waste any of it. It's expensive, and I'm going to use 2 different thicknesses of carbon, 2 different types. And when I made the prototype part, I used up scrap. Now I have a nice brand new roll. Always nice to have something new like this. And we'll cut this now that I have the pattern. You wouldn't want to just cut randomly. You want this so you're not wasting it, and try to lay it out with as few wasteful, it's either one little waste area on the end. Again, and I saved those little pieces for doing future projects where you just want to reinforce something or make a bracket. There's always a good idea to save the pieces. Now that's the heavy duty carbon, the twill. And I have some. This is going to be the outer skin. 3 layers of the thick, 2 layers of the thin will be for the final part. So this is the resin we're using, West Systems 105. And this is a very, very easy resin to use. The special clear hardener is a little more expensive. But when we make a part where you want to see the carbon, it's better to have the clear. It doesn't get brown with time. A bunch of little clamps you can get at the dollar store. These are handy at the very end of the job. And I always like to take all the little spatulas and little Bondo spreading things and sharpen them on the belt sander. So mixing the resin, if you're doing a lot of work, you can buy these convenient pumps that meter it out. For my use, I don't do enough of it that it even matters. It's 3-to-1 by volume. Use a little cup. It's a good idea to mix it in a glass, not in plastic. That's just an easy thing to do. An easy little tip that I've learned the hard way. Sometimes the plastic interacts with the resin depending on what kind of plastic it is. Like plastic cups are really not a good idea. And another thing that's really handy to know about this is when you mix the resin, it's a great idea not to have your friends talking to you or talking about something that is going to be distracting. And also, I always mix it with a steel or an aluminum rod or a drill rod. And when you think it's mixed, mix it 2 more minutes. It's always a good idea. Now, once that's mixed, you have a window of about a half hour to 45 minutes. My shop is cold, so I have plenty of time. It'll be at least 45 minutes, and we're not going to let the camera run, but it'll be plenty of time to get that part laid up. So the idea now with having several layers of that saran wrap on, that's going to act as our release agent. And the first time you paint it, it's a good idea to get a decent amount on there, because you want the bottom part of the carbon to have some resin in it. And it just common sense would tell you that. Now, we'll just go through the whole first layer here in real time so you can see about, and then just multiply it by 5 and you'll see how long it would take to figure this, to lay the actual layup of the part, which is what I'm doing right now. Now, once you have that resin on, now it's real easy. You can just conform it, and of course use a set of rubber gloves. You don't do this barehanded, it goes without saying. Paint on a good amount of this resin. Now, nice thing about the West resin, it's not toxic, and it's not really a high odor. It's not like some of the other resins I've used. The high temperature resin is absolutely awful, and it's supposed to be non-toxic too. So you can do this right in a shop and not have to worry that you need to wear a mask or anything. But this can be as sloppy as can be, and if you're not careful, and you, for instance, right now, if you forget and you walk over and touch the camera on-off button, you could ruin the camera. And ask me how I know. Now, I try again, when I'm doing a layup, I call this a layup even though that's not exactly the right word. When I'm doing this, I try not to be distracted. I've done this when I've had other things going on in the house, and it's not a good idea. You need to dedicate 45 minutes or an hour so that you can concentrate, and you don't want to go have a cup of coffee in the middle of this. You want to do it all 5 layers without a coffee break. Now, trimming the little corner, everywhere there's a corner, if you cut right up to the corner with a pair of old scissors, what happens is it's just the material conforms a little bit better. Now, this is heavy duty material. If I were using only light material, I'd need 8, 9 layers. This, I'm doing 3 heavy ones, 2 thin ones. And in the past, that's worked pretty well for me. And on a job like this, actually, the truth is you could use up scraps. It wouldn't be a big deal if you did this with e-glass or with Kevlar. It wouldn't really matter, since this is not a structural part. Now, here's the trick. You want to, using that little spatula that's been sharpened and cleaned, and you don't want to have a little piece of Bondo on it or anything, because it tears up the carbon. It'll put a little scar in the carbon. And by just troweling it off and just wipe it right back into the jar and get it to drape down. We want the part to go past the seat by 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, so it can just go down straight. It doesn't have to conform all the way right to the end of the seat, and that's what I did on a 652. But this part of it, getting this layer in and getting it nice and smooth, really important before you go to the next layer. So the second layer, and you want to make sure that you have a little bit of extra material going over the edge. You don't want it to end exactly where you want it to end, because we want to trim that and make a nice edge with a nice radius corner on it, or a nice radius shape. So again, it's the same thing, the same with using the material. Now, a lot of people, a mistake you can make right here is try to trim off too much material, and after you're done, you got to stretch it. Oh my God, and I've done it. Yeah, that's one of the tricks I've learned. Leave an extra inch of material in every dimension. And even though I don't want to waste material now, because we're in about a 45-minute time window, I'm tending to keep going here, and I'm doing as fast as I can, but I'm still paying attention not to leave any bubbles in it if I don't have to, and put any scars in it I don't have to, because I really would like the integrity of the part to be as good as I can make it. Now, it really wouldn't matter how many layers you added if you wanted to add 10 if you were making a thicker part. But each layer, the thing to remember, each layer, you want the resin from the layer on the bottom to wick up through the one that's on top, and then put some extra resin on the top, and with the squeegee or with a brush, press it down. Now, on a part like this, it's really not a structural part, so it's not super critical. But if we were making something like an airplane propeller or a part that was going to hold some structure, we'd want to squeeze out as much of the resin as possible so that the weight of the part at the end of it would be half the weight would be resin and half the weight would be cloth. 50-50 is a good ratio for structural parts. This part, it won't matter. It's a cosmetic part, and we just want to make sure we have enough material there that the part is strong and it doesn't flex. Among other little things, every time you add a layer, it's going to get just a little bit nicer. It's going to conform to the curves, and the parts are going to act like the resin is going to be gluing one layer to the next layer. And within this 45-minute time window, that resin is going to start to harden. And it's got a real long shelf life as far as when it starts to harden and when it's hard. You've got a, depending on the temperature of the shop, in my case, it's usually about 15 minutes. So every step of the way here, I'm not rushing because I want every lamination to be stuck literally to the one beneath it. It's acting like glue. And every time now, the thinner material conforms a little nicer. But you see, as I'm pressing it down, the resin is coming up through it. And when you get a little feel for this, it's a sloppy job. But to me, I enjoy the fact that I can make a part that's unique to my motorcycle. And I have many of them on that MT. I have many of them on all the bikes. But I love the fact it's unique. Now, the other thing I like is nothing we're doing here in the shop requires any high-tech equipment. You don't need a milling machine. You don't need a welder. You don't need a CNC machine, anything. This is simple craftsmanship. And this part of it does not have to be real fancy. And a lot of people spend time making something fancy that it doesn't have to be fancy. Where you need to spend the time is when we do the final sand out and the final finish and make the brackets that are going to hold it in place. Then that part of the job requires some real precision and some patience. This part of the job does not. It's just strictly, to me, it's like, I call it mixing concrete. Now, the little clamps, you see how they pinch at the end? Where the points are, I did that on the other one that I made. And in the end, we're going to sand and grind that all away anyway. But here's the trick of tricks. You get to the very end of this, the material, now you got all the layers down, and at the very end of it, whatever resin you have left over, pour it right in place and do what I'm doing now. And just let it make what the equivalent of gel coat would be. So that there's resin, there's a layer of resin that's the thicker the better actually. Because we're going to sand that resin and hopefully not go down into the carbon fiber, which will help that we don't have an imprint coming up. You know, anytime I get a little piece of the carbon, the little threads come up, I don't want to have that in the final part. I just want to have it just because it's just as easy to make the part as nice as needed as I possibly can. Now, once we get that resin on there, I'm just going back and forth in a crisscross pattern, and in the end, I'm going to just hit it very lightly with a hairdryer so it just lays down like you would do if you've ever done a decoupage, and then the extra resin will just drool off the end like icicles, and we don't care. We're going to cut that off in the final product. We don't have to put a final finish on this. The final finish will come when we're done with the part. But the smoother we can make it now and get that resin to lay down, and also the heat will help. You don't want to put the heat on until you have everything laid out. And of course, clean everything up with acetone, all the tools, all the spatulas, and all of the things that you use. And in my case, I go through rubber gloves like they're water in this shop. I don't like contaminating anything. There's always a little bit of resin left in the jar. I don't like to leave that in the shop. I just like to put it out on the back porch. I just want to know that when I see the resin in the jar is like a rock, I know that's like a rock too, and we're fully cured out. And that'll lay down here. Now, the next step on this, we'll go to the next video. That's got to sit there a full 24 hours before we touch it again. So the next time we have available shop time, we're going to get the rough shape in, and I'll show how to cut that and trim it and do the sanding, get the beginning of the rough shaping in, and then the final finish. Now, I've done these. I've done a lot of ones from scratch, some of these for the Suzuki and that, and for the Yamaha and even the Kawasaki. But everyone is unique. They take a few days to make. You have to do them in steps. You can't do it all in one day, no matter what you do. And some of them I've created. They're very unique. Some of them, people really think they complement the bike. And it's the biggest thing is if you don't like it at some point in time, you can take it off. And that's the key thing when you make these parts. You can always go back to stock if you don't like it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit the like button if you did, and thank you so much for watching.